Welcome back to Weekend Breakfast with me, David Bull. The time 7:20 on Saturday, April the 1st. The wife's here. She joins this morning. Now, you were telling us this amazing story about the BT Tower being turned into a wind turbine.
Which initially I was a bit worried about, but then when I thought about powering London from one wind turbine, I was sold.
Can we see a picture of it? There it is, there it is. So the BT Tower is going to be turned into a wind turbine, or is it? That's the question. No, it's an April Fool's, of course, and many of you have got in touch to say, David, it's an April Fool. Yes, very good. Thank you very much indeed for all of those. Also, Phil says, good morning, doctors. Happy April Fool's Day. In America, Joe Biden can now be himself in the day. That's very naughty, but very good indeed. Also, this one from Ruth in Scotland. Honestly, David, so much innuendo at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's how we like it, Ruth. That's how we like it. Keep all of those messages coming in as well. We've got so much to get through, but I'm delighted it's time for the paper review. And joining us this morning is the effervescent Andrew Eborn, barrister and broadcaster. Well, that's quite a dynamic duo, barrister and broadcaster.
Well, it's only for the alliteration. We love an avalanche of alliteration this time in the morning with a bit of innuendo, which obviously is a Spanish suppository, I understand. So
is that right?
I thank you. It's always a joy. But I understand that April Fool's has been cancelled this year because so much unprecedented stories are happening that the made-up stories could never compete. I mean, the news cycle at the moment is extraordinary, isn't it?
I also wouldn't be surprised if in future years on April Fool's Day we get a trigger warning for people so that they don't get upset by...
So it was really interesting, actually. The editor of this programme actually messaged me yesterday and just said, watch out in the papers tomorrow for April Fool's. And actually it was a really important warning because every story I was reading this morning, I was thinking, is this actually true? And some of them are so ridiculous that you think they are.
They couldn't compete with the real stuff happening in the world. It is absolutely extraordinary.
I know. Well, talking of which, where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with Trump, because everybody's favourite story has got to be about Trump. Now, they're wonderful. They're all leading with this, but the Times is basically saying Trump will refuse to be handcuffed. Well, and not that necessarily it's a choice, but as I'm sort of like, not for me, thank you, not today. I'll give it a miss. I'll leave that one. But what is extraordinary, and I think a couple of things. He's actually negotiated that he's not going to be handcuffed. He is going to have the mugshots done. He is going to have the fingerprints and all that, so on and so forth. And it's all to do with the first US president to face criminal charges, all to do with Stormy Daniels. And an extraordinary quote from her about this sort of stuff, about whether she was worried about seeing Trump in court. She said, I've seen him naked. There's no way he could be scarier with his clothes on. So I do think that's extraordinary.
Can you just talk us through this, of course, because this means that he's been formally accused or charged with a crime. Stormy Daniels' real name is Stephanie Clifford. Now, according to the latest news, Donald Trump could be facing more than 30 charges relating to business fraud after this grand jury voted to indict him. So could you just explain? So basically there was hush money paid to Stormy Daniels. My understanding is that those may have come from campaign funds. He then later reimbursed those campaign funds. So for you, how much of this is politically motivated?
Oh, well, everybody would say that it's all politically motivated. And actually, if they don't succeed, it's going to massively backfire because all of the people who support Trump are rallying round him, saying he warned about this. You know, it's a witch hunt. And you see all the banners which have been handed out to everybody talking about this sort of witch hunt. And, of course, he denies all these charges. And this is what happens. The charges against Trump, it's thought to involve, because they're not entirely clear yet, business fraud and campaign finance violations. That's what they're sort of talking about. And there's this so-called hush money. All of this will no doubt come out in the wash. But the reality is that a lot of people say that it's politically motivated. I think they missed a trick. When you say about the handcuffs, it is the money shot to have Trump with the handcuffs on, which would have served his campaign tremendously, wouldn't it?
He could never be president with that picture in circulation.
But when he gets off, or if he gets off...
No,
well, you see, and also what's interesting is no indictment or criminal charges would prevent somebody being president. which is really interesting according to the Constitution.
I think that picture would just hang around and loiter too much and would be used. But I think when you come to the question, David, of is this politically motivated, who knows? I think some of it is politically motivated, but if he's done wrong, then he's done wrong. But when you look across American politics and you look to the other side of the fence, as it were, and you look at the Hunter Biden laptop files, which are there for all to see, and no charges have ever been brought, then you do sit back, and I think the American people will be sitting back and thinking, this is political.
And it's extraordinary to watch that his poll ratings are going up as a result. Middle America is very angry about this. And of course, you won't have the handcuff shot, but you will get the snaps, won't you? The fact is the full-on, the side shot. I mean, he will have those criminal shots done. And he will then say this is subverting justice. And of course, I think that will rally his base. I think
absolutely.
He could do very well.
Absolutely. When the Star has got the sort of unusual suspects and that sort of thing on that sort of basis. So it all looks sort of interesting. Everybody's going to have a field day. But Trump has always been the poster boy for all sorts of news and things like that. And the politics at the moment is dictated by characters. Last week we had Boris and so on and so forth all over, lots of ink being spilt about him. This week it's all going to be about Trump, and quite extraordinary.
And of course he also faces two other criminal investigations. We've got one in Georgia. This is relating to alleged attempts to overturn the result of the 2020 election.
Yes.
We've got another in Washington and the US Capitol riot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, American politics is certainly not like British politics.
And those two charges are far more serious
exactly.
than the storming of the cup. And you look at that sort of principle, and I think that's the thing. And if he wins, it's interesting, this is going to be the first one, effectively. If he wins on this one, then he's going to say, well, it's all politically motivated, and he may then...
And do you think he will win?
I think that nothing... Teflon Trump is what I always call him. Nothing seems to stick.
How quickly will it happen?
Probably very slowly is the reality, and he's obviously standing in all sorts of press. You drag it out there, and all sorts of people will throw all sorts of things, including that money shot, whether it's the side shot or whatever. So I think he probably would want it to happen fairly quickly, because his lawyers will make sure he gets off, because that's what tends to happen. The reality, however, it's probably these things take a long time.
It's just so fascinating. And we'll see what happens with Donald Trump. I mean, he is the man who refuses to lie down.
He will never go. Well, it depends who with, I guess. But you're absolutely right.
Right, sorry, Renée.
He is, but I mean, I guess the point has to come where the election is not that far away in America, 18 months away. The point will have to come where, depending on how long these things take, someone whispers in his ears and says, actually, at the moment, you can't stand, or this is lingering, you need to step aside. Otherwise, he's going to ruin the chances for the Republicans.
I mean, it was extraordinary. I've just looked at the lead. He's doubled his lead over Ron DeSantis as a result of what's going on. So actually, this plays into the Trump playbook.
It totally does. He predicted it last week, is what he said.
It does all the day. The Democrats want Trump. They would rather stand against Trump than DeSantis.
Because they think they're more likely to win.
And they don't think they will win against DeSantis.
Right. Let's move on now, shall we, to talk about firms that pollute the water. I was absolutely astounded by this. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's revolting footage you've seen on the thing with people swimming, and then the next shot with all this effluents being pumped out into our waterways. What it is, and two different angles on this. In the Times today, they say unlimited penalties for water firms that pollute. And what it is, companies will face unlimited fines for polluting rivers and the sea under government plans. And at the moment, there's a £250,000 cap on civil penalties. They're talking about abolishing that. It is appalling. The other angle on that, Starmer is sort of saying the Tories are turning rivers into open sewers. So is what he's saying.
I'm not quite sure how it's the Tories. They don't seem to run the waterways. But just in terms of the data, the Environment Agency showed that sewage was released into England's waterways more than 300,000 times last year. That's 824 times a day.
They are allowed to do it. They just have to notify.
In circumstances, certain circumstances, yes.
But I mean, it's awful, absolutely awful. And you look at the footage, and as I say, they always put the juxtaposition of the footage of the waterways, which is what they've done, and all these people who like to swim.
So let me just clear up that point for Renée. Companies are permitted to spill from their overflow systems only in exceptional circumstances, such as heavy rain, like all the time, or to stop sewage backing up into people's homes.
Yeah, but they could say that's happening all the time.
But isn't the bigger issue here that we need to invest in the infrastructure to make sure that we don't do this?
You're absolutely right, David. it's looking at, well, what's the alternative? If they don't do that, where's it going to go? And looking at, as you say, it's about infrastructure.
But
so
let's
it's always
remember,
about both sides
these
of
are
the story.
private companies.
Well, that's where I was
They're
going with
private companies making huge profits, and actually they're looking like they're going to put their charges up by about 9 to 10% this year. And I object to that on several bases. One, on this, what they're doing to our rivers, but also they're losing 3 billion litres of water a day. This is crazy, through leaks. So, you know, I know we have a Victorian water system, but they're making a lot of money. They're paying out dividends to their shareholders. They should actually be told to sort it out, that they can't put their prices up and they're going to get big fines.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Whether they will actually implement these unlimited fines remains to be seen. But, I mean, from 250,000 up to unlimited
is quite extraordinary. And I think they have to do something. So otherwise it becomes that political hot potato. And as you say, you get headlines like Starmer blaming the Tories. I'm not quite sure it's that something. But you have to turn around and say, we're doing something. In the same way as Rishi Sunak last time saying, I'm dealing with antisocial behaviour. This is another sort of headline. Here's an issue. This is what we're doing about it.
And this is quite antisocial.
I'm just totally antisocial.
I mean, I was listening to an interview with people who go swimming in some of the water, and I just thought, my goodness, you know, we're putting your health at risk by doing
Well, I
this.
saw a quote, I think it was from Starmer actually this morning, that said that they're turning our rivers into sewers.
Yeah, that's exactly what it
That's
says,
disgusting.
Yeah.
And, you know, it seems to me that it's another example of how we're going back in time. The infrastructure, as you rightly say, is breaking down, and we're going back to pre-Victorian times, who had better sewage systems than we did for their population.
The Romans had fantastic
Well, they
sewage.
did indeed, but of course population expansion, and we haven't done anything about it. We're still reliant on Victorian infrastructure. But obviously we've got a super sewer going in London,
we do.
yeah, so that should make a big difference. Let's move on now. I was overexcited about the CPTTP deal this morning. Maybe I'm the only one.
Well, it is. I mean, you're not the only one. And as the Mail leads with that last deal to turbocharge Brexit Britain, which is fantastic. People are sort of saying, well, what does it all mean? I mean, it's, again, Rishi Sunak is saying, only because we left the EU have we grasped the trade opportunity. And I think looking at the sort of reality, you need to break it down as to what it basically is. And basically, members need to drop. The countries include Australia, Brunei, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, Vietnam and Canada. And they need to drop more than 95% of their tariffs. They represent 13% of the world economy, with a combined population of over 500 million. So it's actually a really, really important, powerful stage. We wanted to join because the key goal of the government since leaving the EU was opening negotiations nearly 2 years ago. And Sunak basically said it's an example of the UK exploiting the post-Brexit freedoms. And I think this is what's happened. They're trying, people have always spoken about, has Brexit really worked? Tories were talking about getting Brexit done. Again, this is part of the narrative which you need to have and that sort of thing. So trumpeting, another Trump reference, trumpeting these fantastic results. And it is a fantastic result. We are now negotiating, we're part of that to make it make sense.
So it's really interesting. And so I was saying earlier that people said to me, oh, you don't understand, this is not actually adding that much to our GDP over 10 years. But the point is, it's the potential of where this goes. And Lord Frost has written this article, which I keep going on about. He goes on to say the CPTPP is where the growth is. The CPTPP has the same GDP as the EU 27. And the clever bit for me is, if the US joins...
Yeah.
And then we would be part of that agreement without actually having a bilateral trade deal, which we can't currently get with the US.
No.
Then we do win.
Yeah,
We do
absolutely.
win. And also, I think, David, people that are saying that to you on Twitter and wherever haven't actually read anything about the deal, haven't read Lord Frost's article. They've just read the headline in the paper that they choose to read that wants to rejoin the EU, and they're just parroting that. And this is half of the problem, that we are actually living in a world where people just read a headline.
Yeah.
They don't actually look into the detail. And the future for us as part of this partnership is really amazing if we can fulfil it.
Yeah. And you've got to look at the figures and things like that. IHA, I hate acronyms. I think the problem is the problem is it's not very catchy as a headline. People don't really understand
The name
it.
is terrible.
It's horrible. I mean, what's the name again?
The CPTTP.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Alliance, yeah.
You notice
Easy
I
for
haven't
you to
even
say.
tried that.
No. But you're right. So again, it's not very user-friendly. But actually, I do think it's really interesting. And there's one other bit which I rather like about this. It means that we are starting to diverge from the European Union rules.
Yes.
They will not like that one bit. There's also another caveat here, by the way, which I suddenly realised. The EU could also join.
Oh, there you go.
So you see, then if the US is in it and the EU is in it, therefore we have all the benefits of actually a single market with the European Union, but we don't have to listen to their silly laws.
And that's the point. It's all about communicating and what does it actually mean in practice. All the thing was about a negotiation to get us a better deal. Are we better negotiating in or out or so on and so forth? And the reality is these sort of deals, properly communicated, are really, really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one to watch, actually.
One to watch.
It's very interesting indeed. Right. So this is a big story, isn't it? About obviously the coronation.
Yes.
Wednesday or May 6th. So not very long to go.
Not very long today. Archie's birthday. I keep reminding people.
Yes.
That's why Charles picked it.
Well, so are Harry and Meghan going to be there? We don't know, but someone who says he may not be there is.
Well, it's interesting how people report these things. Biden to turn down the coronation invitation. Let me put that in perspective.
So I thought we knew this already.
We did know this.
Did we?
And we did. And in perspective, no US president has ever attended a coronation. So there are different ways of doing a headline. When Eisenhower was there, he was the one when Her Majesty was her coronation in 1950. He didn't come. No. And it wasn't a snub. He just hasn't done it. Biden has turning around. He's going to send some wonderful people. So
his wife.
We're available.
Possibly Jill, his wife.
Possibly Jill, his wife, which would be lovely, and other delegations. He's very respectful about this sort of thing. The way that people spin it, it's not a snub.
Do you think it's because he's 80?
No, I know very sprightly 80-year-olds who love to travel. I think no US president.
He's also coming to Ireland, isn't he? He's celebrating the Good Friday Agreement, which obviously will be before that. So maybe he's a busy man.
Well, it's interesting, and people always use whatever it is. When Harry was here for his court case, he said too busy, he can't see anybody. And as I say, same with Charles, even though his little trip to Paris was cancelled, he was still said to be busy. All of those sort of things is interesting. We never really hear the truth about it. And if somebody will turn around and say, look, why are you not coming? I assume he would be invited like every head of state. But he would be the first US president ever to attend a coronation if he were to come.
I mean, it will be an extraordinary day. I'm very excited about the whole thing.
It will, and I think it's also to do with the amount of security that he travels with as the president. I mean, I think they come over with about 30 cars. And, and I think probably we don't want that so much as we didn't on the Queen's funeral.
Well, I think we can cope with that. I think it's an extraordinary thing, even though it's a scaled-down coronation, the reality is we can cope. And we can cope very well. And we are brilliant. It's what Britain does best, is put on these fantastic events.
OK, let's move on. Another royal story, of course. The King and Queen Consort have been in Germany. And I was very impressed to see that the King can speak German.
I think he can speak a few languages.
He can, but of course he is. Well, he has German ancestry.
He does, absolutely. Long to reign over us, they say over a couple of pages there, sort of hold it up or whatever. But no, they love him. He did really well. And I think anybody who can turn round and get the public on their side. What I loved about it, lovely little stories. I mean, like he brought his own pen, so it doesn't leak. No, but he did, because the line, he was so furious, that glorious. I love that.
This is Camilla said to him, I'm not going through that again. You carry your own pen.
You bring your own pen.
You've got to bring your own pen. But he's doing really well. I have to say, ever since he's become our king, I think he's excelled in a way nobody was really expecting.
I mean, if you look, actually, the crowds were really deep to see him. And I was speaking to some German friends, and they all love the royal family.
They do.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, actually. But, of course, as we said, they're all related anyway.
Yes, of course. They're all from one big family. They're all hoping they're 29th in the line or whatever. But you're right. And I think they are our greatest ambassadors now, if you like, to turn around and whilst the world is in turmoil, to have a bit of stability on that sort of basis is good. But no, I think he's doing a fantastic job.
I do. I do too. I'm very pleased for him, and I hope that all goes well. I'm very excited about the coronation as well. And also, I was so saddened to hear of the death of Paul O'Grady, who I knew, who I've knew for many, many years. Lots of donations flooding in, aren't there?
It was really, really sad. I think people were shocked. I mean, I know he'd had health issues. Not everybody was completely shocked. But yes, Paul O'Grady and Lily Savage. I remember the great old days. One of the most witty, brilliant people in showbiz. And so generous as well, which is lovely. What they're saying is, for the love of Paul, the donations have apparently been flooding in to Battersea Dogs Home. It's already hit £100,000 this weekend. And obviously he loved his dogs. He had there's a lovely little picture, you may not get a close-up of it, but a lovely little picture of him with his dog and so on and so forth. And I think it's the nation, there were poor inspiring, there's a better one there inside, poor inspiring. So lots of people sort of turned around and as a result thought, well, we loved him so much. What can we do? And so donations to Battersea Dogs Home.
Do you know, he was one of the quickest-witted people I'd ever met. He was so funny. His repartee was absolutely extraordinary. And, I mean, you couldn't not have a fun time without, you know, when you're with him.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And it's people, you're in this wonderful world we call showbiz. I love it. Some people are very different on air to outside. He was genuinely hilarious all the time and actually very welcoming. I mean, in terms of the way that he looked after people, the way that he bonded with people, both on the screen and off screen, was lovely.
Yeah, a very sad and tragic loss indeed.
And very young.
And
67, wasn't he?
Yeah,
no age at all. No age at all.
But allegedly he passed away peacefully, so that in itself is a blessing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about AI, shall we? What
the
have you got
advance.
there?
Well, there's all sorts of things. There's a rather interesting cartoon which I won't show you. But the new age of AI, and every day there are sort of headlines about artificial intelligence, and it was Stephen Hawking who said it's our greatest achievement, but it could also be our greatest existential threat to our future. Many papers are sort of saying AI to pinch 300 million jobs, they're saying, on that sort of stuff.
So this was a report from Goldman Sachs last week that said worldwide there will be 300 million people who are just replaced by AI. Now, if you think about that, you know, that's absolutely tragic, because work has so many meaningful things in people's lives.
Or is it an opportunity? Do we upskill people so they don't have to do some of those menial jobs?
But I don't think it is such an opportunity as it would have been. I talked about this with Colin last night, as in the Industrial Revolution, when there were machines that were being built to be manned and used, and, you know, things were being made. This isn't like that, and they won't need 300 million people.
And so what sort of jobs are these?
Well, everything. Any job. Well, firstly, anything that can be automated will be replaced. I'm speaking about this. You combine it with robotics and so on and so forth. But also, AI is replacing lots of things in the creative industry. It can now. I mean, we've only just started with chat.
It can write. It can draw.
Yeah.
It
can do all
look
that
at
sort of stuff.
X-rays.
Everything. So if you use the advances in medicine as a result, but it can also be a force for good. So if every doctor, and we talked about this last time on the programme, if every doctor had access to every bit of research, whatever that is, it could accelerate diagnosis. It could make sure that people who are advanced. Well, possibly. If you turn around and say, here are the symptoms, whatever it is, get the greatest research.
But you should know as a doctor.
Well, but you can't know everything. You can't have access to every bit of research.
Well, no, or do they become physician associates?
Yeah, well, exactly. There's an assistant. It's a tool to help you.
Renée's not impressed.
But also, in terms of loneliness, when people... And it's been shown that if you can have time to talk to somebody...
To somebody?
No, but people... And it's Alan Turing, you might remember, the wonderful thing, in 1950, came up with the imitation... He's on the back of a 50-quid note. I'll bring out your 50-quid note. He always basically...
I don't have a 50-quid note.
You don't have it. There, you have mine. There you go. So Alan Turing, who's on the back...
Amazing.
He's on the back of a 50-quid note. He basically said it's about the imitation game. And what can happen when a computer can fool you into thinking that you're dealing with a real person.
Indeed.
They've won the imitation game.
But the bit missing for me is empathy.
Yeah.
Well, but they can fake anything.
There's another bit missing here. That what we're missing here, Andrew, is that when these 300 million people don't have jobs anymore, so they're not interacting with actual human beings every day in their work, meeting people, meeting their partners of the future, they're not going to have a relationship with a computer and build a family.
Well, you say that. Well, maybe not build a family bit, artificial insemination, as opposed to AI. But basically, they will, however, have a relationship. And it was an extraordinary statistic. Well, people feel as though you're talking to a robot, and some of these things look so real, and they have all sorts of things. It's a great cure for loneliness.
This is not a world I want to be part of.
No, I mean, it's interesting. Italy's just banned ChatGPT, hasn't it?
Good.
What it's worried about is data breaches. And I always say that the biggest currency now is data. That's what we do. We're trading information about ourselves.
It's extraordinary. I mean, you were laughing at me earlier because I was asking the producer, Adam, a question, and blinking Siri answered.
Did you answer? In here, he said, that's an interesting question.
I was like, what? Who is this person?
You said, are you happy?
I said, are you happy to Adam? And then Siri answered saying, yes, I'm thrilled.
Oh, no, but Siri always says that. Siri's always very positive. I'm a bit depressed today.
Siri actually said that's an interesting question. But, you know, ChatGPT is going to ruin education.
Yeah, I agree.
Because human beings are not going to have to develop their own knowledge and learn how to write.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why I disagree.
I know you disagree.
And I'll tell you why. It's basically, and they are now allowing it. Lots of universities are allowing it. It passes.
That's nuts, isn't it?
It's passing the bar exams. It's passed all sorts of bits and pieces. The reason they're allowing it, it's a very good first draft. So if you have
But hang on a minute, surely the whole art of an essay is actually to go away and do original research and then to write something which is your first draft.
But what happens then is you then analyse it, because actually it's not getting it right yet. And if you've ever tried it, I would recommend there's a free version. Everybody should try ChatGPT, have a look at it, see what it comes up about.
I'm going to write Renée a letter.
No, but they use
it. Do you know, I always say to people, because I loved English, I loved writing, I loved essays, and the hardest bit about an essay is the first draft. It's the introduction, it's the conclusion. When you've got that, then the rest of it is easy.
But for me, it's about the formation of thoughts and having the tumble dryer of thoughts and then trying to work out how am I going to extrapolate that? Where do I start? What's the middle? What's the end? Yeah. That's the skill.
No, but you're also, but even in the creative industries, though, because it can now write a song in the style of Ed Sheeran, and you can always, I know that's what happened, you can also fake voices. So there's all sorts of legal issues about the rights of artists as a result of it, and licensing. You may remember Bruce Willis. He had a fake version of his face because he can't act anymore because of his particular illness and so on and so forth. He's retired from acting, but he can continue to live and to earn royalties. What we need to do is to recognise it. So there's two sides to it. I always say flatten the learning curve, understand what the technology can do so we can use it as a tool for good, but also make sure the laws and regulations are in place to protect us. Because artists now...
We are de-skilling humans. There will be no need for humans anymore.
But that's a different question. You're probably
Well,
right.
that's a different question. But if humans have enough money to live a fantastic life, and you've got all this AI...
They won't have enough money to live a fantastic life.
OK, we're going to take this offline now. I think it's time for a break. Andrew, thank you very much.
Lovely to see you.
We'll see you later on, actually.
Absolutely. I'll talk to you about Eleanor Tomlinson.
Yes, we'll talk about something completely different a little later on. Thank you very much indeed for the moment, Renée. You two continue now. This is Talk TV. We're broadcasting live from central London. It's time now for Best of Britain.
Best of Britain.
So in this segment, it's something I'm really passionate about, where we showcase someone who is the best of Britain. And it strikes me that this lady who we're about to meet really does fulfil that criteria. You may remember there was a wonderful image, a sort of a picture, a cartoon that had been done of the late Queen holding Paddington Bear's hand. And I was very moved by that. And I remember you and I, Renée, were very moved by that, weren't we? It was such a stunning picture, actually.
That kind of pushed me over the edge, that picture. I remember it was the first time I actually felt quite tearful about the Queen's death when I looked at that.
That's right, just walking off into the sunset, actually. And now it's time to meet the artist who is responsible for that, and I have to say she is the best of Britain. And her name is Eleanor Tomlinson, and she is an artist, and she joins us now. Good morning to you.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to meet you, and I have to say, when we first saw that image, we were both really moved to tears. I think you captured the heart of the nation.
Oh, thank you so much. Honestly, there aren't better words for an artist to hear, I don't think, than that. And little did I know that's what I'd done, really, completely unbeknown to me until... it started just popping up everywhere, and it was just like never being the same again.
Well. So just tell us the inspiration, because I was reading all about you. You obviously studied art, and obviously this is what you do. But what was the inspiration behind it?
Well, it was that magical weekend, wasn't it? Back in June, I was actually away at the time up in the Dales, so I had more time than usual to follow it on the television and in the media. I'd sat down to watch Party at the Palace on Saturday night and that magical opening, and I was just immediately inspired. I mean, if you have a look at the wider range of my work, that was quite different to the norm, really. I'm not really known for figures and things like that and almost telling a story in that kind of way. But I just had this idea immediately that night, and it wasn't until the following afternoon, after going for a long country walk, that I sat down with my pens and pencils and brushes and brought this idea that had been ingrained in my mind.
I mean, it's just so... I mean, the detail is absolutely extraordinary, and I believe the one that we just seen... I was looking at your website last night, but the one we just saw is about the coronation, the two corgis looking down the mall, the level of detail, and there, of course, Paddington and the Queen, and a corgi walking off into the sunset, and as I said, that really brought a tear to all of our eyes. But the level of detail, you are classically trained, and also, by the way, I watched your video about how to draw a bumblebee yesterday.
Oh, did you?
I did.
You illustrate a bumblebee?
Yes.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm always encouraging people to be creative and, not to sound at all, but release that inner creative within them, because I don't think it matters, what medium or in what way. I think we've all got that within us, which is something that I've always wanted to encourage. But yes, the coronation piece has been, I'd launched the collection online last Sunday, and it's globally gone down so well.
So now we have to wind slightly, because joining us in the studio, you've got your headphones.
I've got my headphones because I don't have the ear, but I can't hear anything.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'll take them off then.
No, you put them on. I mean, so then Andrew, you're back with us, Andrew Eborn, barrister extraordinaire. So how do you fit into this story?
What was lovely is we met on a TV programme, something called the BBC.
I've never heard of it.
Never catch on, another acronym. What happened is Eleanor was right royally ripped off last year. That image of Paddington and the Queen was taken by lots of people, put on merchandise and things like that, all
without her
unlicensed, without her permission, and so on and so forth. So what happened is the BBC phoned me up. As you know, my background is in intellectual property and copyright, and talked to me about the protection and what rights she has as an artist.
And you hadn't met Eleanor?
I hadn't met Eleanor before, and so we met on air, and I basically volunteered to help her. So what's now happened is we've mopped up all the pirates. We've now done official deals. So we've got a wonderful puzzle with Ravensburger. We've got a whole launch in Japan of all sorts of wonderful merchandise. But also, in addition to that, we're launching a gallery at the O2, a restaurant called Sucre. And that will be Eleanor's permanent gallery, where she's going to be doing workshops, going to be doing art classes that we mentioned.
Do a bee.
I mean, you can come along. It's on the 10th and the 11th of April, so full details are there. So you can come and meet Eleanor. But also, it will be her permanent gallery in London.
So can I just ask you then, in terms of copyright? So for Eleanor, as a young artist, obviously, she does what she does best, which is to be an artist.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, that was then stolen and used around the world. It was used on all sorts of things. Is that common for artists?
Well, unfortunately, it is. And there are two elements to it. There are people who knowingly take it, knowing it's somebody else's property, and a lot of people do it innocently. So, for example, when the Queen passed, obviously lots of people use that image, and Eleanor has no problem at all with that, because that was just for personal use, and it was a clever way and a sensitive way for people to connect, if you like, with Her Majesty. There are lots of people who are not doing it for legitimate purposes, and there are many, many pirate items out there, and they basically stole from Eleanor. They used her work.
Her IP.
It is, exactly, and copyright is like any other property right. It belongs to the artist, and it is used... must be used only with permission.
So, Eleanor, what was that like to suddenly... I know Andrew, but and he's quite a character. But let me just ask you, what was it like for you here to suddenly have someone who was interested in your welfare, who could protect your rights?
Oh, it was wonderful, and Andrew certainly is a character. It's been a wonderful...
That's an understatement.
October. It was wonderful because it'd been a problem since June, since I'd created the artwork, and I hadn't said anything. I'd tried to approach these companies on a one-to-one basis, but of course, as a young 24, 25-year-old artist, to say they didn't really pay any attention or want to do anything about it, of course, that was the case. And then following the Queen's devastating passing in September, it just turned into this monster, and very quickly, within hours and days, there were thousands of listings on a commercial basis across Etsy, eBay, Amazon, you name it, worldwide. And of course, I'd been sharing artwork for the last 10 years, ever since I started, doing what I do really as a hobby business in my mid-teens. So having never had that problem at all, let alone the scale of that sort of problem, it was devastating. I felt very, very powerless. So...
And how did it make you feel? I mean, this was your vision, your idea. It came from your soul. How did that make you feel?
Just really upsetting. 'Cause it's, you know, I mean, I must say, for every individual that maybe is acting not as they should, to put it lightly, I can't stress enough, there are hundreds and thousands more that will fight your corner and do what they can, whether that's reporting a listing, but then to have somebody like Andrew and the BBC put us in touch like they did. Just so powerful for me, because to have somebody with that knowledge, that experience, and put it this way, they listen to Andrew.
well, sure. And let me just ask you, Andrew. So the first thing you did was to stop all of the merchandise that had gone out without Eleanor's permission.
Yes, absolutely. So it's basically mopping up the market. I think when people are aware that rights, intellectual property rights, are just like any other right, you're as a creator, you can control what happens to your work, whether it's copying and reproducing, making versions of it, but also putting it on merchandise. So we've mopped up the market.
How do you do that?
Well, a number of things. Obviously, the power of the law behind you, because it's an infringement of copyright, and therefore...
So you wrote very stern letters.
And the good thing is, there were lots of people who... Somebody popped one up on our website, I wrote a letter, and it was taken down immediately. I think having the power of that behind you, so one is the enforcement side. The other thing is making people aware that there's a licensing procedure now in place for Eleanor's work, and so we've set up lots of deals. Got big deals in Japan, some of the major sort of things. We're doing Coronation teas where people can come along and meet Eleanor, and they can have these wonderful artwork in that, and quintessentially British, but looking around the world and making people realise that you can get in touch, you can license Eleanor's work in an official way, and then we ensure about quality control. You ensure that the artist is properly rewarded.
And so, Eleanor, you're 24, I think you said. You've been propelled into global fame through really one picture, which is really extraordinary. How do you feel now, given that you now have a range of merchandise? You seem to be in multiple countries. You're having your own gallery in the O2 in London.
Oh, it's an absolute artist's dream. There's no other way of putting it, really. I'd always loved art ever since I think they picked it up as early as nursery. So to be in a position, I mean, I must say I'm 25 now, just in case anybody comes.
Oh, so old, so terribly old.
But it really is, and I feel so fortunate that the years of building up a business whilst at school, whilst at uni, have paid off, and I feel really, really fortunate that really my stars aligned really back in June. And you know, you can't ever think or even hope that a piece will take that kind of it was just created into something different when it went viral, and you couldn't, like I say, you couldn't even dream of something like that happening. The chances are so slim. And I just feel really grateful every day that happened to me.
And of course, being an artist is notoriously tricky. It's very difficult. You have very irregular income. What do your family make of what you've achieved?
I'd like to think they're very proud.
I'm sure they are.
I'm a Yorkshire lass with Yorkshire parents, so we don't sort of express.
Oh, so we don't do emotion.
We don't do emotion, but it's always like, I've always sort of had a very good work ethic instilled into me, so it's always that kind of, you know, what could you do better, and that kind of thing. So I'm always sort of striving and working hard for the next thing, and you can never really take it for granted, something like this, the opportunities that I've had over the last year. So I don't want to become complacent that then that's necessarily going to be a pattern for the rest of my career, and to keep developing my work and keep creating what I love, and just hope that it continues, that other people love what I create.
And so just tell us about the website. So obviously there are different pieces on there so people can explore your work. There are those workshops as well. Do you want to talk people through those?
Yes, absolutely. So at the moment, we're really focusing on the Coronation collection, which we wanted to go big, bold and quirky, and have everything best of British in there, from corgis and Jack Russells to a King Charles Cavalier, the Horizon line of London, just everything, and Coronation capers, which I think you can just see and in the corner there, that's the original for my wall. So from that artwork that took 50+ hours to create, there's prints, cards, textile items. We've got a beautiful fine burn china mug that we've worked with the best of British manufacturers to create, along with obviously a jigsaw by Ravensburger that they've licensed, and that's just been a wonderful thing and such a different new avenue to go down, but fits in with my work and it being that quirky, playful style just so perfectly. So that's been so exciting as well. But then in the rest of the shop and on my online portfolio, you can see all my other work going back from years, and on the whole it celebrates the UK countryside and just everything that I love being where I am in Yorkshire. And yes, you've got the online workshops as well. We've got some videos. And so if somebody wants to try working in ink and watercolour like I do, it gives you a breakdown step by step. And I encourage anybody to, have a go, no matter if you've, just got some pencils and you can only do the drawing stage, and just inspire people.
So,
really.
So what I loved about it was the fact that you gave instructions. You'll need a pencil and you'll need this, and you have to then go through each step, and then you do the little bee thing. I mean, I was drawing very bad bees last night, let me just tell you. Eleanor, just finally, what advice would you give to young aspiring artists? Because it must be so tempting to give up sometimes.
It really is, and I think school education is on the whole geared towards encouraging everybody down maybe a more academic route. I think even if you're not actively discouraged, equally to not be encouraged can make you think that it's not a possible or viable career path, and it can be really, really scary and daunting, especially in the current climate of, I left uni in 2019, 6 months, it was COVID, and then we've had cost of living since. So I just keep going, honestly, just keep working, keep going, and it is possible. And just good luck.
Yeah, well, Eleanor, it's been such a pleasure to meet you. Congratulations, many congratulations on everything you've achieved at the beginning of your career at just 25. I think you'll agree with me that Eleanor really is best of Britain.
Best of Britain.
Amazing young lady, Renée.
Absolutely amazing. And as she rightly said, people aren't encouraged to pick up a career in art because it's hard and, it's very bitty and there's no continuity to it. So I think obviously she's drawn something which has actually probably paved the way for the rest of her life in terms of her career. She's very lucky, but that shouldn't put other people off, because drawing for some people really is their release and their passion.
And Andrew, from your point of view, for budding artists who may well have sculptures or a piece of art or whatever, what can they do to protect themselves?
Well, the important thing is to realise they are a bundle of rights, and that only you, as the creator, can dictate what happens to that work. And so with Eleanor, what we're doing is not just looking around the Coronation, but also launching her as a brand. I mean, for me, she's the new Beatrice Potter, if you like. She has that sort of wonderful quirkiness, so we're doing book deals, we're doing all sorts of things, but not just around the Coronation. So she's got an amazing catalogue of work and work on that sort of basis. So the best thing to do is recognise that you have rights as an artist and to ensure that they are protected.
And what I love about her is she's so understated. She's not doing it for money. She's doing it for the love, for the passion. And you can see that. You can see that in her work, and you can see that just talking to her as well. And many congratulations to you as well, because you've protected her future.
No, absolutely, and for generations to come. She will be a multi-zillionaire as a result of her work now, as opposed to other people ripping her off on that sort of basis. So if you've got rights, make sure they're protected.
Very well said. Thank you very much indeed. Time for a break. Now, after the break, Steve Denyer will be here. Oh, yes, it's Denyer's Delights. This is Talk TV.